Hey boys and girls, welcome back to Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch. Today is going to be the last episode of our revisited series, and as promised, today is going to be all about the 12 Tales of Wonder, since we promised that since the very beginning of the series as a whole, and honestly, it's just going to be a chill episode today, since we're just going to be reading out of the book. So, with that, I'll be on our very first of our 12 Tales of Wonder. So with that, the camera goes off, and I'll see you very shortly. The first tale, The Cowardly Prince and the Lion. In a certain country there lived a prince named Tamalo, who was sharp of mind but weak of spirit. His father was a brave king, strong, wise, and loved by his subjects, but the noble example he had set served only to weaken Tamalo's spirits. On one occasion his father told him thus, "Soon, my boy, it shall be time for me to retire, upon which thou shalt become king." While the announcement delighted the prince, it filled him with such a terrible dread, for he did not have the spirit required to ascend the throne. In his vexation, he wandered from the castle, lost in thought, whereupon he encountered a fearsome-looking lion. The prince tried to flee, but the lion caught him easily, and his paw lifted him to his gaping mouth and swallowed him whole. At first, the prince thought he was doomed, but at length he began to reconsider his position. "At least I no longer have to become king," thought the prince. After taking a deep breath, he said to the lion, "Mighty lion, I am the prince of this country, and the day after tomorrow I was due to become its king. Since thou hast now swallowed me, however, thou must needs become king instead." "King, eh?" replied the lion. "I shan't complain about that." Thereupon the prince led the lion back to the palace. The courtiers were shocked to see the lion enter the palace, but the prince pleaded with them from inside his stomach, and the lion was accepted as king. The lion proved to have quite an aptitude for royal duties. Whensoever there was a dispute in his kingdom, the lion would simply growl at them, the quarrelers. "Stop complaining, or I shall eat you alive." Whensoever a bridge was swept away by a flood, the lion would simply use his paws to rip down a tree and lay it across the river. Regarding taxation and legal matters, the lion was utterly ignorant, but whensoever such a problem arose, Prince Tamalo would speak to him from inside his stomach, and provide him with a sound solution. 2 dragons. After some time, news reached the king that 2 dragons were ravaging the eastern and western edges of his kingdom. The people were terrified and looked to their king to deliver them from this terrible evil. Upon which the king announced that he would go and smite the dragons himself, but even the fearsome lion stood no chance of defeating 2 such terrible dragons. "My dear stomach dweller," said he then, "what in the wide world should I do now?" Prince Tamalo considered the lion's question, and at length provided him with a suitable scheme. The lion headed east to the part of the kingdom that was being ravaged by the larger dragon, and roared in its ugly face, "Dragon, I shall soon slay thee. I fear thee not, for no matter how large thou art, thou shalt never devour me." "Oh ho," scoffed the dragon, "we shall see about that." Upon which he ate the lion whole. From inside the dragon's stomach the lion said, "Dragon, thou art now the king of this land. It is therefore the royal duty to defeat the dragon ravaging the western part of thy kingdom." At first the dragon paid him no heed, but when the dragon witnessed the humans around him bowing down in defense, as Prince Tamalo had requested them to do beforehand, he decided to do his royal duty, whereupon he went to the western mountains and slew the other dragon. Once the other dragon had been slain, the lion commenced to scratching the inside of the dragon's stomach. "Ow, it hurts," cried the dragon, rolling on the floor in agony. "Have mercy, I beseech thee." To which the lion said, "If thou wouldst not feel this pain, thou must promise never again to hurt thy people, or this kingdom." "Ow, very well, I promise," cried the dragon in reply. But the dragon was a cunning beast, and Prince Tamalo knew that he would break his promise the moment the lion was out of the stomach. He therefore had the lion take out the babbling berry that he told him to bring with him, and place it inside the dragon's belly. This berry was known to make noises that sounded like someone muttering to himself. With the babbling berry in his stomach, the dragon shan't notice that the lion escapes, thought Prince Tamalo. Later that night, when the dragon was sleeping, the lion crept out of his gaping mouth and set back to the palace. The dragon left the king and his subjects alone forevermore. A new king. The kingdom had been at peace for 10 years, when the lion said to Prince Tamalo, "Stomach dweller, it is time thou camest hence from in there. I would have thee take my place on the throne." Prince Tamalo was shocked, and replied in a quivering tone, "I fear that I do not have the spirit to become king. But thy judgments over the past 10 years have invariably been wise," said the lion. "That is as may be, but I am a coward," replied Prince Tamalo. "It was only because I was protected by a great strong lion that I could act so decisively." Yet the lion paid no heed. With an almighty sneeze, he ejected Prince Tamalo from his stomach. It had been 10 years since Prince Tamalo had seen the wide world outside, and he could not believe his eyes. The lion's mane was now full white, and his face was covered in wrinkles. Shut up inside the lion's stomach, Prince Tamalo had been quite unaware of any of this. "As thou canst see with thine own eyes," said the lion, "I am grown old. 10 years hast thou resided in my stomach, and yet not once did thou scratch me or cause me any pain, as I myself did to that dragon. Though thou couldn't have done at any time. The courtiers and the subjects of the kingdom did not accept me because I am strong. They accepted me because I have been given them my all. By which I mean thou hast given them thine. Thou art the true king of this kingdom. Thou lackest not the spirit, I assure thee." In like manner, everyone at the palace beseeched Prince Tamalo to become their king. "Prince Tamalo, everyone is humbly grateful for everything thou hast done. Our country needeth just such a king as thee." Upon hearing these words, Prince Tamalo felt his courage swell up within him, as King Tamalos gave still more of himself to his country, and despite the fact that the lion had retired, he continued to live alongside the king in the palace. Though many countries are ruled by animals these days, in ancient times all kings were human. Indeed, the magnificent lion about whom you just read was the first ever animal to be acknowledged as a king, and the world has never been the same since. The second tale. The Squirrels in the Bramble, Protectors of the Forest. Once upon a time, the whole wide world was lush and green and covered in countless forests. In the mild days of spring, children would play in their clearings, making necklaces from wild flowers, while in summer, they would shelter from the sun under their ancient trees, and in autumn, of course, they would pick and eat their juicy fruits. Indeed, forests have always been important to youngsters, being carefree places in which to play with gay abandon. But what do you know of the forest guardians? Every forest has one. They are believed to be godlike creatures that protect the woods they inhabit, as well as all creatures that dwell within. But how do these guardians come into existence? No human knows for certain, of course, but it is believed that somehow selected from amongst the creatures that live in the forest. Naturally, since the guardian is responsible for protecting all the forest inhabitants, the biggest, strongest creatures in the forest is usually the one selected. There has, however, been one notable exception, as related in this well-known fable. A proclamation from deities of the forest. A forest luxuriant with leaves was home to a gently flowing river, and a spring that produced fresh water, and all the beasts lived there in amity, from tiny insects to creatures as big as 2 men. One day the deities of the forest made a proclamation. The time has come for you to choose your guardian, for the forest dwellers did not have a guardian at the time. As soon as the message was received, a controversy prevailed amongst the beasts of the forest, which each one claiming he would make the best guardian. "These sharp fangs will frighten away any enemy," growled the black wolf. "These huge claws will shred impostors into pieces," roared the great bear. And so it continued, with every large forest animal boasting his own case, from the stag with his great antlers to the white catfish who dwelt in the spring. The forest's smaller inhabitants, those who had no chance of winning any test of strength, could but watch this assembly of beasts in silence. The bickering continued for several nights, until one day a golden haze descended upon the forest, bringing with it an aroma so sweet that the beast soon forgot about choosing a guardian and simply spent the day contented, dazed, and staring at the new golden coloring of the trees around them. The very next day, however, the crimson saplings sprouted from some of the trees and quickly grew into a large tangle of red bramble. From the golden haze the beast had so enjoyed was in fact a cloud of evil disposed spores. By the time any of them noticed, however, the bramble had covered the entire forest. The bramble strangled tree after tree, causing them to wither and die. It seemed only a matter of time before the entire forest would be quite devoid of life. Thus the wise owl said, "Somewhere in this forest is the tree which the spores first took root. That tree is the source of this terrible bramble. Cut off its source, and the entire thicket will wilt." Desperate to save their forest, the black wolf and the gray bear resolved to find the tree that the wise owl had mentioned. However, the bramble had grown so thick and dense that their great bodies simply would not pass through it. It was time for the smaller forest creatures to come to the fore. The ones who abstained, while the other beasts had bickered and boasted about who was the strongest, and so the mottled snake slithered through the bramble, moving deep into the forest in search of the tree where the first of the spores took root. Alas, the bramble wraps the tree completely, hissed the snake. "We shall need to cut through it somehow, but I have neither claws nor teeth, only this forked tongue." Upon hearing the mottled snake's report, the blue woodpecker leaped into action. "I shall peck through the bramble in no time," he chirped with confidence. But as he neared the tree with the mottled snake he had described, the bramble became too thick, and he was quite unable to spread his wings, let alone fly, close enough to peck the bramble, and thus he went back dejected. That was when the field mice and the squirrels rendered their assistance. "These sturdy front teeth of ours shall gnaw through the bramble," squeaked the field mice. "But the brambles goes all the way to the top of the tree," observed the squirrels. "Can you truly climb so high?" The field mice had to concede that they could not, and so it was the squirrels who were set off to cut through the bramble that surrounded the tree that had been the first to succumb. The squirrels soon reached the tree, and scaled it with ease in no time. And all they were nibbling at the bramble, and making light work of cutting through it. No sooner had they begun to chew their way through the bramble than the large parts of the thicket had covered the forest fell away and withered, and so the squirrels decided to continue nibbling until the tree was completely free of the bramble. Alas, the bramble contained poisonous spores, and the squirrels who swallowed them soon felt the effects of and fell lifeless to the forest floor. And yet, this did not deter the other brave squirrels, who had resolved to rid the tree of the brambles and save the forest at any cost. And each of them continued to chew. The moment the last of the bramble was cut, and the entire tangle withered away, the last remaining squirrel fell from the tree, dashing its head upon the ground. The squirrels had saved the forest. When the black wolf and gray bear were finally able to wade through the dead bramble, they came across the bodies of the dead squirrels and let out terrifying cries. The Guardian. As the animals' cries rang out, the squirrels' souls floated from their bodies as pure orbs of light. The black wolf and the gray bear watched in amazement as the orbs floated into the hollow in the tree, bringing it back to life. The deities of the forest had spoken. The squirrels were the forest's true guardians. Though they were amongst the smallest and weakest of the beasts, their courage was greater than all of the largest creatures. Size has no bearing on a creature's stature. The third tale, the fairy who wouldn't stop crying. The teary fairy. Sit tight, boys and girls, I've got a story to tell you. A fairy tale, if you like. Fairies like me used to be 10 a penny. See, but you'd be hard-pressed to find one these days. Always on the move we are. Anyway, this story is about a very special fairy, and while it all happened a long time ago, the fairy's still going strong today, or so I hope anyway. Right then, let's get cracking, ain't it? The story's about a little fairy who wouldn't stop crying, sobbing. He was day and night. Now us fairies are hell of impressive, especially when we're little. We learn all sorts of tidy tricks from the other fairies, but we can pick up bad habits just as easy. I don't know whose miserable mug this poor dab saw when they first popped out into this world, but it must have been proper tragic, because the first thing he ever did in all his life was cry, and then he kept on crying. Now, it's not like this fairy wanted to be spouting tears all the time, he just couldn't help himself. Every time it got dark, he'd well up like blinking clockwork he was. What's more, young fairies can be hell of a cruel, and this little cry fairy got ribbed something terrible, all of which just made him want to cry even more, of course. In the puddle of tears, one day a traveling wizard happened to spot this fairy standing next to a puddle of tears. He was proper knackered, this wizard, and hell of a thirsty, so what he did was he took a drink from the puddle and ate it. There's lovely, he thought, and felt 10 times better straight away. Then off he went with a spring in his step and got on with his wizardly work. A bit later, when everything was done, he decided to go back and thank the fairy for the tears he drank. But when he came back, the puddle was even bigger than before. "Oh, fairy," he said, in this grand old voice, "why do you cry so much? I've been gone 3 days, and still you weep." "Some," said the fairy, "scared I am, scared of the dark, and I don't know what to do about it." After a few more sobs, he went on, "And everyone makes fun of me. Good for nothing I am. Life's rubbish." And with that, he went back to sobbing. "I see," said the wise old wizard, stroking his big white beard. "Perhaps a lantern is what you need." So he whips his tidy lantern out of his cloak and plonks it on the end of the fairy's nose, right? Now the light from the lantern made the fairy blink like mad, but it didn't half cheer him up. And sure enough, he stopped crying. Felt like he'd been born again, he did. "You see, little fairy," said the wizard, "you shall never be in the dark again, no matter where you go." I'm not scared anymore," the fairy gasped, cackling the first smile of his whole entire life. "And you are no longer good for nothing either," laughed the wizard. "That smile of yours will bring comfort to a great many people. Come with me and I shall show you." So the fairy packed up his daps in a little bag and went off with the wizard. They had some pretty hair-raising adventures and all, but the fairy never once got scared. He had the lantern on the end of his nose, see? And even after he parted ways with the kindly wizard, he never cried again, and the light on his nose is still shining to this day. Have a look around, like he might be right nearby. Well, what do you say? Proper tidy tale, wasn't it? I bet you got a tear in your eye now. The fourth tale, The Bear Man and the Princess's Tears. A kidnapped princess. The king of a peaceful kingdom had one daughter, whom he loved very much. This princess was very brave and very wise, and assisted her father in ruling the kingdom. Hard by the edge of the kingdom was a steep mountain. No one ever approached it. However, for it was known that a witch lived in the cave at its foot. The witch had long had an inclination to rule the kingdom herself, but the fearless princess never failed to foil her plans. The witch had an apprentice, who was top half bear and half bottom man. This apprentice was known as the Bear Man, for that was his name, and was fearsomely strong, but very dull-witted, and always carried out the witch's commands to the letter. One day, the Bear Man was in a cave making a potion, when the witch returned with a young woman. It was, yes, guess, the princess who was always ruining her plans. The Bear Man looked at the princess and was twice shocked, firstly at how wondrous and fair she was, and secondly at the sight of her hands and feet, which the witch had turned to wood using magic. "Look after the princess," the witch commanded. "The Bear Man, do not let her get angry or shed a single tear, else there shall be trouble." The Bear Man immediately went to fetch some fruits and preserves from the larder. Since the princess's hands had been turned to wood, the Bear Man tried to put the fruit in her mouth directly, but the princess turned away from him and looked instead at the witch. "What will you do with me?" "I shall tell your father that I have taken you hostage," the witch replied, "and demanded his kingdom in return for your freedom." "That would be a waste of time," retorted the princess. "Father is always telling me not to believe anything witches say. He will not trust you, even if I am in mortal danger." "Silence!" shrieked the witch, and with a wave of her wand cursed the princess, who became quite unable to speak. The witch had stolen her voice. The Bear Man's duties. The next day, the witch went to the palace to negotiate with the king, and it was left to the Bear Man to provide for the royal hostage. The Bear Man liked looking after the princess. He felt sorry for her, with her wooden limbs and stolen voice, and he tried his very best to take good care of her. The Bear Man was in fact very kind, you see, and despised doing evil things. He was happy knowing that the witch would not scold him for being kind to the princess. After all, it was the witch herself who had commanded him to look after her. But while the princess did not shed a single tear, neither did she smile so much as once. The Bear Man used the finest ingredients to cook dishes that he hoped would make the princess happy. But when the meals were served, she would do no more than stare at him in total silence. Now the Bear Man knew that the princess would only smile when her hands and legs were free again, and she had regained her voice. But the Bear Man could not lift the curse himself, and he knew the witch would never do it. All he could do was continue to cook fine meals for the princess. The princess who wouldn't cry. Several days passed, and still the king would not listen to the witch's demands, just as the princess had foretold. This did nothing for the witch's mood, of course, and one morning when the Bear Man was bringing food to the princess as usual, the witch shouted at him, "Why are you wasting such good food on her? Anything will do as long as it stops her from crying. But I thought the princess would be happier if she could eat fine foods, mistress." "Who told you to make her happy?" With that, the witch snatched up her wand and flicked her wrist, rendering the princess stony deaf. She then proceeded to tell the Bear Man a secret. "There is a reason I told you to stop her from crying. If she sheds but a single tear, all of her curses will be lifted at once." The Bear Man now realized that the witch had not wanted him to be kind to the princess, or to look after her. She had simply wanted him to stop her from crying. He now knew what he had to do to make the princess happy once more. The next time the witch had left the cave, the Bear Man put his paws around the princess's rosy neck and started twisting, yet she still did not cry. The Bear Man felt he had no choice but to strike her. He was strong, and the poor princess was unbalanced on her wooden legs. She fell to the ground violently. "Now cry, I beseech you. Cry with all your curses will be lifted." The deaf princess lay on the ground, clearly in pain, yet still she did not cry. She simply continued to stare directly at the Bear Man. The Bear Man, for his part, resolved to treat the princess with great cruelty. He stopped feeding her, set snakes and insects upon her, and pulled out her beautiful golden hair. The Bear Man tried his best to be brutish, but when he looked up upon the princess in agony, he felt so sorry for her he started sobbing, though he hurriedly wiped the tears away with his big paws. Knowing that he must not let the princess see him crying, it was too late. The princess had realized that something was amiss, and resolved not to shed a single tear, no matter what ordeals the Bear Man put her through. The Bear Man snarled and bared his teeth, and treated the princess more cruelly than ever, but the princess was very brave and very wise, and did not shed a single tear. Tears at last. A month passed, and the witch visited the king once more. When she returned to the cave this time, however, her mood had changed. The king refuses to negotiate. There is no point in keeping a hostage anymore. It is time to kill her. Upon which she waved her wand once more, sending a deadly arrow whistling towards the princess. The Bear Man immediately threw his great bulk in front of her, shielding her from the arrow, which pierced his chest. As he crashed to the ground, the wand fell from the witch's hand. The Bear Man's fate was sealed. With his last morsel of energy, he opened his eyes and looked up at the princess. She stared back at him, her eyes wide. "I have done such terrible things. I will die an evil man in your eyes." Such were the Bear Man's sorrowful thoughts as he perished. As he did so, tears fell in a flood from the princess's eyes, raining down upon her wooden feet and arms, lifting the curse and returning her to normal. The princess immediately stood, picked up the witch's wand, and used it to draw a rune, for the princess could use magic as well, you see. A large fire engulfed the cave, and the witch's wailing could be heard for miles around. Once the blaze had subsided, nothing remained of the witch, save for a small pile of pitch-black ashes. At the moment, the bear man was brought back to life as a beautiful young prince, for his dull-witted bear form was nothing but a curse, imposed upon him by the wicked witch. The prince asked in a weak voice, for he was still upon the brink of death, "Your Highness, why did you cry for me?" "Witnessing your death, it filled me with terrible sorrow. Had I only known that crying would lift my curse, I should have done so far sooner. I see now that you were trying to help me, even as you did those horrible things. I treated you terribly, Your Highness. Please forgive me." "Of course I forgive you. You are a kind person at heart, and for that I am truly grateful. Now please do not die." Upon hearing these words, the prince shed one single final tear and breathed his last. The forbidden spell. The princess stared at the prince's lifeless body for a long while before picking up the wand once more with conviction. She had settled upon a course of action. She would cast Ashes of Resurrection. Upon casting the spell, the cave was filled with white light, restoring breath to the prince's lungs, as it shone upon him. The princess's spell had brought him back to life. The very next moment, however, the princess fell to the ground. As she lay there, she raised her face and asked the prince, "Who are you?" "Ashes of Resurrection is a forbidden spell," he replied mournfully. "Those who cast it always pay a terrible price. The price you have paid is your memory of me." And the prince's eyes filled with tears of terrible sadness once more. "Why are you crying?" asked the puzzled princess. "Because something important has been lost." Upon hearing the princess's next words, however, the prince could not help but smile. "Well, perhaps together we may make it anew." The boy who would be God. The wizard who controlled the clouds. There was once a boy wizard who was endowed with a great deal of magical ability. No sooner was he able to walk than he could cast spells no other wizard could, controlling the clouds above and making great seas and mighty mountains move at will. In truth, such feats did the boy with more honor than he deserved. He had not practiced any more diligently than other wizards. His talents were innate and had been with him since birth. The boy, however, grew up quite certain that he had been blessed by the gods, and came to believe that his rightful place was among them, in heaven itself. No sooner had the thought crossed his mind than the boy became desirous to make it an immediate reality. Boys who are born with such exceptional powers are seldom accustomed to waiting. A trial from the gods. The boy made for Jabbar al-Dukhan, the highest mountain in all the world, and climbed to its summit, reasoning that the gods would hear him more clearly if he were closer to heaven. "Gods, I beseech you to listen. I am the most powerful wizard in the world. Verily no man alive is my equal, and thus I believe that my place is in heaven with you. I wish you could consider me one of your own." The heavens responded with an enormous thunderclap. The boy wizard's insolence had roused the passion of the gods. The thunder had followed by a bolt of lightning, aimed directly at the boy, but the boy was ready with a simple wave of his wand. He swatted the lightning away. "Do you see?" he cried to the gods with glee. "Do you see how powerful I am?" At length, a voice responded from the heavens. "Boy, if you truly believe yourself to be as powerful as a god, then you may prove it by taking this trial. Overcome it, and your wish shall be granted." The boy leaped with great joy upon hearing these words, believing as he did that no trial was beyond his powers. Suddenly, however, everything became quite dark. The boy had no idea where he was. Indeed, his hand could not be seen in front of his own face. The voice spoke once more. "Boy, this is a world of darkness. Your task is to tolerate it for 8 days. So it's simply a matter of waiting," thought the boy, relieved. "That shall not be proved difficult." But the voice went on. "There is a door in front of you, boy. Raise your hand and you shall feel it. On the other side of the door is the world of light, where all godly knowledge resides. Enter and you shall become one of us. The door, however, must be not be opened until 8 days have passed." While with that, the voice fell silent, and all was quiet once more. The boy reached out his hand in front of him. Though he could not see it, the door was there, just as the voice said. "I shall open that door," the boy said decisively. "I shall wait a full 8 days, and then I shall become a god, and all will be revealed to me." 7 days of darkness. At first the boy could do nothing but sit and contemplate his current plight. It was not long, however, before his mind started conjuring all sorts of thoughts. What wonders awaited him when he became one of the gods? What manner of place was the heaven that the gods called home? How would he treat his human minions once he was one of their gods? And so it went on. He found himself increasingly agitated, anxious to see what awaited him once he opened the door to the world of light. He kept his resolve for 6 days and 6 nights, but on the 7th day the boy was overcome by curiosity. "In one more day I shall become a god," thought the boy. "Surely it is of no consequence if I open the door a little early." He reached for the door once more, and traced its even surface. Eventually his hand came across a small protrusion, which felt like the cover of a keyhole. Timidly the boy lifted it, and looked through the other side. A blaze of blinding light flooded through the keyhole, knocking the boy a full cubit backwards. It was incredibly bright, and yet he simply could not close his eyes. The world on the other side of the door was beyond the boy's human imagination. Its scale and beauty seemed to pierce his very soul. The world of the gods. The thought alone made the boy shiver, but even as he did so, he was plunged into the darkness once more. The ever-wandering eye. The boy had failed the trial, yet he was still allowed to enter heaven and become one of the gods, for they acknowledged his abilities and showed compassion towards him. They could not, however, show the same compassion towards his eye, the one that had peered at the world of light. The eye was condemned to wander, disembodied through the skies for all eternity. The boy wizard's eye traverses the skies to this day, soaring above the birds, gazing down upon the worlds below. It can never hope to soar all high as the heaven where the gods reside, however. Indeed, it is trapped between the human world and the world of the gods forever. Occasionally, when it is overwhelmed with extreme dissatisfaction, the eye swoops down close to the Earth's surface, bringing a devastating whirlwind in its wake. These howling gales are known to have destroyed cities and forests, and are rightly feared by ordinary humans. And so the consequences of the boy's wizard's folly are still being felt. The sixth tale, My Other Self. On a hilltop, what follows is the extraordinary story of an ordinary little girl. When I was a little girl, I had the reddest hair you've ever seen, and I lived with my mother in a small village, tucked away in the hills. I was never any good at magic, but I loved gardening, and could grow all sorts of flowers and medicinal herbs. Behind my house was a low hill, from which you could enjoy a wonderful evening view. I used to walk to the top of it every night, to sit on the big old roots and watch the sun go down. One day, my mother cut her hand on a glass that I had broken. Though she washed the wound straight away, just as she always taught me, the cut soon became infected, and by the next morning she had a very high fever. I took care of her the best I could, of course, but several days passed without any improvement in her condition. Then one night, after I cried myself to sleep with worry, I woke with a start to find myself standing in front of a strange door. I opened this door and walked through it, to emerge on top of my favorite hill. It looked like the same as it always did, except for one thing. There was someone else there, sitting on the root and sobbing quietly. I took a sharp breath and thought to myself, could the girl sitting on the root actually be me? Her hair just as red as mine, and it glittered like a ruby in the setting sun. The bright blue bird. I was feeling quite sad myself, but the girl sitting on the root seemed absolutely inconsolable. Feeling sorry for her, I asked, "Are you all right? Why are you crying?" At this, the weeping girl lifted her face, giving me another shock. It was exactly like mine. I was careless, and my bird flew away, she said. "Oh, I did love it so. So that's why you're crying. I've been careless too. As it happens, I made my mother sick." I thought for a moment, then asked, "What kind of bird was it?" "It was blue, bright blue. It was so very beautiful. My mother's eyes are blue as well," I sighed. "But they don't seem to sparkle like they did before she took ill. We carried on talking for a little while, and before long, we'd become firm friends. She loved gardening too, and was enjoying gazing at the sunset from the crest of the hill. It seemed we had absolutely everything in common. Eventually I said, "Here, take this. It's a flower I grew. It's called a warm welcome, and birds love it. Perhaps it might make your blue bird come back." I had already put some of these flowers at my mother's bedside to try and make her feel better, as well as some in her hair. "Thank you," said the girl, smiling. "Oh my, it really does smell wonderful. Hey, would you like to come to my house?" I nodded. Off we went, down the hill, together and into the girl's house. She placed the flower I'd given her next to her window. Before long we heard a sound. Peep, peep, cheep, 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 and the blue bird flew in through the window. "Chi-Chi," shouted the girl. Recognizing her pet, the bird had flown straight for the vase that held the flower. It seemed a little unsteady, as though one of its wings was injured, but I couldn't help feeling happy that the warm welcome I'd given the girl had made her bird come back. Waking from the dream, all of a sudden I was in front of the strange door again. I walked through it and found myself lying in the bed once more. It was a dream, I sighed. Then I threw off the sheets and went to my mother's bedroom. Much to my surprise, though, I found that she wasn't there. That's when I heard a sound coming from the kitchen, and I ran downstairs. "Mother," I cried. "Good morning," she replied cheerily. "You must have been wondering where I'd got to. I just felt so much better when I woke up this morning. Now then, would you like some breakfast? I'm so famished." And my mother's blue eyes were sparkling once more. Every person in this world has a soulmate, a person in another world with whom they share a soul. Soulmates' destinies are intertwined, and occasionally they even overlap. So should you ever chance a step through a strange door, do not be surprised if you were to meet someone just like you. The seventh tale, how the little girl became queen. The little girl. In Xanadu, the kingdom in the clouds, the ruler has always possessed many a mysterious power, not least the ability to make the most prescient prophecies. This is the story of one such ruler, of whom little was expected when first she ascended the throne. Xanadu's new ruler was a little girl, cowardly and weak. Though it was a peaceful place, with a temperate climate and few if any monsters, Xanadu had never known a cowardly ruler. The thought alone was simply preposterous. The girl herself knew that she was a coward, having never displayed courage or daring. Since the moment of her birth, she was scared of sleeping alone, and the thought of being in the temple at night filled her with holy dread. Despite claiming that she had a well of courage to draw on, if necessary, she would undoubtedly have been found wanting if she had been asked to deal with a giant or a dragon, or even a lion. Life surrounded by adults was lonely and dull for a little girl. She had no friends, and became very sullen. As a result, everyone assumed that she was humble and wise. For most of those who rise to rule over Xanadu are powerful sorceresses, and prone to self-importance. Though baseless, the myth of the little girl's wisdom meant that her reign was very peaceful, with none of the tensions of infighting that marred the reigns of her predecessors. Sinister rumors. She had not ruled for long. However, when it became apparent that a dragon had taken up residence near Xanadu, in a great cavern, measureless to man, alas, this was no ordinary dragon. Indeed, it was said to be as large as a castle, utterly evil, and endowed with a tail twice 5 miles long. Such sinister rumors grew, as sinister rumors always do, and the time they'd reached the palace, they had courtiers in the state of some excitement. After much frantic discussions, a conclusion was reached. Their ruler, the little girl, must be sent to deal with the dragon. Though she was still young, everyone believed her to be both wise and brave, and it was concluded that her age was no significance, though thus having no choice but to fulfill the duty assigned to her. The girl was sent off for the dragon's cavern, a savage place. The waning moon cast scarcely any light into the dismal cave. and the big wet drops fell onto the little girl's head as she made her way through the darkness, nervously clutching her wand. Though she quivered with fear, she knew she had a little choice but to push on. She was the ruler of Xanadu after all, and the rulers must show some courage, however frightened they may be. Having pushed deep into the cavern, the girl finally encountered the dragon. It was not as big as she had feared, but it would still have ordinarily been more than a match for a little girl like her. The dragon, however, was injured. One of his wings was broken, and he was unable to fly. Indeed, he had no way at all of avoiding the little girl's spells. It seemed the tables had turned in her favor. Just then, the dragon turned to her and said, "You came alone. I suppose you knew I was injured. I shall surely perish soon. All you need to do is wait, and your duty shall be fulfilled." But then the little girl took out her wand and proceeded to draw a rune. The spell she cast began to heal the dragon's wounds. Being so young, it took a long time for the healing magic to work, but her concentration never wavered. "Heal me and I could come after you and eat you. Are you sure that's what you want to be doing?" The little girl thought for a moment before replying politely, "I should not like to be eaten, yet I do not see why you should die. Perhaps we could reach an agreement instead. I will heal your wing if you swear to spare this kingdom." The dragon made no reply, and simply gazed at the girl with flashing eyes. Once his wing had been fully healed, the dragon picked up the little girl and placed her on his broad back, strode out of the cavern, then flexing his newly healed wing, he carried the little girl to the summit of a tall mountain. As the dragon reached the top of the mountain, it seemed to grow in front of the girl's eyes. At last it began to resemble the castle-sized dragon that the courtiers of Xanadu had mentioned. Indeed, it began to look as though it could eat a castle thrice over. "This is my true self," declared the dragon. Now you may be weak, but you are both courageous and kind. My original intent was to eat every last one of your subjects, but I have decided to honor our bargain and spare this kingdom." The dragon's kind words touched the little girl deeply, and the two of them became great friends. Then the dragon shrank back to his smaller size, and put the girl on his back again. And together they made for Xanadu. When they reached the city, however, the dragon grew big once more. When the little girl explained what had happened to her courtiers, they realized not only that she was wise and brave, but she was also kind from the moment on. And she was no longer referred to as the little girl. She had become the Queen of the Heavens. She never forgot her dragon friend, and they spoke together often until the end of their days. The eighth tale, The Shepherd Boy, the Lazy Son. Two shepherds who were father and son worked together in the fields. The father looked after the sheep from the morning till night, constantly patrolling the pasture and looking out for wolves. The son, however, spent every day at leisure, staring into the distance and not lifting a finger to help his father. One day the father turned to his son and said with regret, "I am getting old and shall not soon be retiring. Though you are my only son, it has become clear to me that you have no enthusiasm for sharpening. I have started to think that I should be better entrusting my flock to somebody else." The son was quite shocked, for the flock was his only livelihood, and resolved to start assisting his father in the fields, chasing sheep, tending to the grass, and so on. Alas, he soon grew tired of such tasks. At a loss of what to do, the son supposed he should pay a visit to Old Father Oak, an ancient tree in the deep dark woods, possessed of an infinite wisdom on all matters. "Oh, Old Father Oak, is there not some matter of fruit that I can swallow to excite my enthusiasm?" the son asked in vexation. "I am afraid that such things do not exist," replied Old Father Oak. "There is, however, a fountain hidden deep within a nearby forest. Drinking of its water provides a godly dose of energy." The fountain. The son traveled in the direction indicated by Old Father Oak until he came to the fountain and tested its cool surface with his hand. "I shall take some of this water home with me," he thought, before realizing that he had no vessel in which to carry it. "Alas, I must return home empty-handed," he lamented. The son was about to go back to fetch a jug when he decided to sample a mouthful of the fountain's water. Surely enough, he immediately felt the great surge of energy that the Old Father Oak had predicted. and used his axe to chop down the nearby tree, carving it into a pitcher that was almost as big as himself. Once the pitcher was finished, the son filled it with the water from the fountain and made for home. The vessel was very heavy, and the journey was very long. He nearly gave up on several occasions, but every time he felt like abandoning his journey, he would stop by the wayside to take another gulp of water from the pitcher, and eventually he arrived back home. "I have water enough here to last a lifetime," the son thought with such a sigh of relief. He was very weary, and he fell into bed to sleep soundly until morning. The pitcher. The son awoke from his slumber and resolved to take another drink of water from the pitcher. "Oh, how full of life I am," he explained happily, and set about his duties at double the usual speed. As he did so, he resolved that no one else must be allowed to drink of the water, the precious water in the pitcher. In the days that followed, the son spent much of his time ensuring that no one went near his pitcher, yet he took care to attend to his chores while he did so, knowing that his father would otherwise be angry whenever a villager approached the pitcher for a drink of water. The son would interrupt his own labors and offer a cup of a different water, thus preventing any of the water in his pitcher from going to waste. He was also reluctant to waste the water from the fountain on himself, and so worked hard every day without touching it. Then one very hot day, after the son had been hard at work in the fields, he realized that a terrible thing had happened. The water had evaporated in the searing heat of the sun. When the son realized that the water upon which his future depended had disappeared, he was overcome with despair and collapsed upon the grass. The sight of the son lying prone excited the villagers' concern, and they rushed to see if he was all right, for the son had gained reputation in the village for being kind and hard-working. On account of all the cups of water he was wont to provide thirsty villagers. Some of the villagers gave the son a drink of water. As he lay there, he was amazed at how delicious it tasted. It was the freshest, cleanest water he had ever drank, and what's more, it gave him the same surge of energy that the water from the fountain had done. His father stood next to him and said kindly, No water on earth can compare to the first water you drank after sweating all days. Why, I should think of it as a fair sight, better than the water from the fountain." For the father knew that the son had visited the fountain. The son rose to his feet and smiled back at his father. "You are right, father. It is truly better by far. Hard toil brings its own rewards." The ninth tale. The Flute Makers. 4 brothers. In a certain kingdom there once lived 4 brothers. Though their parents had both died, and they had grown up poor, the brothers had become famous and highly regarded. The first brother was very strong. Once the kingdom was in need of a new lake. He had lifted a stone bigger than 3 dragons out of the ground, creating a great hollow. He then carried the stone to the top of the tallest mountains in the land, lest it prove an eyesore to anyone. The king could not contain his delight as he watched the hollow slowly filling with water. The second brother was the greatest artist in the land. He went to the top of the mountain and carved wonderful sculptures from the stone his brother had carried there, and offered them to the king, who was rendered speechless for the first time in his life by their beauty. The third brother was known as a master craftsman. He took the sculptures that his brother had made and erected sturdy walls between them, creating a mighty castle. He even used the remaining pieces of stone to build a working clock. The king was amazed at how it always told the correct time, despite being made of stone. The king now had a new castle that he believed was the most beautiful and the best defended and the most convenient in the wide world. The brothers were delighted and became full of confidence, for each of them believed that he was the greatest man alive. "I am the one the king should thank for having such a wonderful castle. After all, I am the one who carried the stone all the way up the mountain. Thou mayest have carved the stones, and thou mayest have bound them together. But had I not brought the stone up here in the first place, nothing of that could have been done," said the first brother. But the king would not have looked twice at the castle had I not carried those sculptures so beautifully, retorted the second brother. "And yet it was I who took the sculptures and made them into the castle." What use hath the king for sculptures, pray tell? Beautiful though they may be. After some time, these discussions became so fractious, the three brothers resolved to live apart on the eastern, western, and southern edges of the kingdom. The youngest brother of the four was unlike the three older brothers. He excelled at nothing and was weak and clumsy. Though his older brothers would mock him constantly, the youngest brother was docile sorts. He did not pay much heed to such insults. He was, however, worried about his brothers living apart, and he resolved to pay each of them a separate visit. A thick fog. A short while later, disaster befell the kingdoms. A thick fog covered the entire land, blocking all sunlight for 100 days. Crops would not grow, and people became unwell, and yet the very worst of it was the fog put an end to all music, for it simply could not be heard through the heavy broom. The kingdom adopted a silent, funereal air, and still the source of the fog remained a mystery. One night, as the king slept fitfully, he had a strange dream. In it, someone was telling him that the only way to clear the fog was to play a certain flute, the most beauteous flute in the world. Upon waking, the king immediately summoned the three brothers who had built his castle and commanded them to build such a flute. Since the three brothers no longer spoke to one another, however, they would not cooperate, and each went off to carve his own. I am the only one capable of making a flute fit for a king, said one brother. It is simply too great of a feat for the other two of you. Huh, thou mightest better say that thine own self, countered the second. My flute will be the finest, as thou shalt not soon see. Boast if you will, scoffed the third. All men know that mine will be the best. And so the arguments continued. After some time, all three brothers finished making their flutes and went to present them to the king and his subjects. All the kingdom gathered on the shores of the lake, and that had been created by the first brother. Anxious for the presentation to begin, the first brother picked up his flute, which was big and made of stone, and blew. Try as he might, however, the flute would not produce a sound. The king soon turned his attention to the second brother. His flute was a beautiful, delicate instrument made of clay, but when he blew it, it too produced no sound. The king was now becoming rather agitated and hastily commanded the third brother to blow his flute. It was made of a single bone, the holes drilled in appropriate places, and yet it could not produce a single note. The king was furious and banished the brothers from his sight. Several days later, the king awoke to hear the song of the flute that he had dreamed about. It was a wonderful sound, one that cleansed the heart and brought tears to the eyes of the royals and ministers and soldiers, plowmen, and even the baker's cat, whom many had thought was deaf. As the flute played on, the thick fog that had plagued the kingdom began to clear. The king was naturally delighted and started searching for the source of the blissful sound. Trusting to evidence of his ears, the king came at last to the house of the fourth brother. There he had found him and his three brothers sitting together, with their tears in their eyes. The king began to extend his warmest gratitude to his youngest brother, but was politely interrupted. Alas, this flute was not my own work. My three brothers built it, and he proceeded to explain all that had come to pass. The youngest brother has been visiting his three brothers every day, hoping to persuade them to work together as before, but his brothers were stubborn and would not listen. After some time, hither and thither, from south to east, and west and back again, all the youngest brother's efforts got the better of him, and he collapsed in the heap. When his three elder brothers heard what happened, they all felt sorry for the youngest sibling, and went to visit him as he recovered. The eldest brother visited him first. Is there aught I can do for you? He asked. Indeed there is. Hie thee to the forest, and cut down the tallest tree thou findest there. Chop it then into small pieces, and bring them here to me. Thinking that his brother wanted firewood to keep him warm under the thick fog, the first brother agreed to do as he was asked. Very well, young brother, he said. I shall start cutting right away. Thank you, the youngest brother replied, from his bed. And before long, the brother came back with a smile on his face and a pile of logs under his arm. The next day, the second brother came to visit the youngest sibling. Is there aught I can do for you? he asked, upon which the youngest brother brought out one of the logs that first brother had cut for him. "Indeed there is. Carve of the wood something beautiful for me, perhaps a pipe?" Thinking his brother wanted an ornament in his room to make him feel better, the second brother agreed without the slightest hesitation. "Very well, younger brother," he said. "I shall start carving right away." "Thank you," the youngest brother replied from his bed, and before long the first brother came back, a beautiful wooden pipe under his arms. The next day, the third brother came to visit his younger sibling. "Is there aught I can do for you?" he asked. Upon the youngest brother brought out the pipe, and his second brother had carved. "Indeed there is. Wouldst thou be so good as to drill some holes into this pipe for me?" Thinking that his brother wanted something to entertain himself with, he was ill, the third brother gladly agreed. "Thank you," said the youngest brother from his bed, when his older brother had returned with the finished pipe. "But I actually have one more request." "Of course, younger brother, what is it?" "Call our 2 other brothers and tell them to come here." Though the third brother hated his older brothers, he could scarce refuse his ailing sibling's request. So piteous did he seem, and he agreed to go and fetch them. Despite all being gathered beneath the same roof, the 3 brothers would not look at each other, as much as less speak. Then, in the midst of the silence, the youngest brother pulled out the flute they had made, and lifted it to his lips. As soon as he began to play, the 3 brothers began to weep, realizing how foolish they had been. As he listened to the sound of the flute, they recalled the past that they had shared, their humble home, their parents who had loved them so, the days they had supported each other, and helped each other before they won fame. The 4th brother continued to weep as they realized that each one of them was truly special. When he worked with the others, all 4 of them indeed, for it was the youngest brother who could produce a pure note from the flute, the tears they wept were the most beautiful tears they had ever seen, for they were the tears of love. After the king had finished listening to the youngest brother's story, he decided to give all 4 brothers a special medal. From that day onwards, the brothers agreed to always work together, and they all lived happily ever after. The 10th tale, The Flying Machine, The Dreamer. There once was a boy who spent every day and days dreaming of soaring through the skies. As a young child, he was always asking wizards to make him float for a few moments. A delightful experience, but he himself was no good at magic, since he also hated the lessons of all kind. There really was no hope of him becoming a wizard, but he dreamed of being able to fly. Nothing could make him give up on his dreams. One day the boy took a journey to another world. There was a tunnel that connected the 2 worlds in those days, you see, and the people were able to travel between them quite easily. Now the boy knew that there was no such thing as magic in the other world, meaning that no one there was able to fly. He had, however, heard rumors about a painter who lived there, who also dreamed of taking to the skies just like he did. As soon as he arrived to the other world, the boy headed straight for the painter's house. But when he got there, there was no one home. Feeling rather bold, the boy decided to take a look around for himself. The first thing he saw was upon entering the painter's house was a magnificent sketch, a drawing of such a strange machine that was attached to something that spun around very quickly. There was no doubt about it. This machine could fly. What a shame, thought the boy, that in my world, magic is so common that no one even bothers inventing things like this. Flushed with excitement, the boy took a tracing of the painter's sketch and took it with him back to his own world. After working so hard for several years, the boy finished building the machine in the sketch, and for the first time ever, he was able to fly. Why, this is the happiest moment in all my life, thought the boy with a big grin. Even though he was only for a few seconds of a time, he was finally able to live his dream. The Sage and a Young Wizard. A short while after he had finished building the painter's flying machine, a sage visited the boy and spoke to him very grandly. You must dispose of all knowledge gleaned from that other world. The boy was shocked. But why, he asked. This machine lets me soar through the skies. It's what I've always wanted. Using a machine to achieve something that should only be achieved using magic is akin to poisoning this world. Poison? Why is it like poison? Magic may only be used by those who possess a pure heart, and who have undergone the proper training. Wizards borrow some of nature's power and use it to humans' benefit. Only those with a pure heart or uncorrupted by evil are able to do this. Using machines to triumph over nature is not the behavior of a pure-hearted. Now, what the sage meant was that anyone could use a machine to manipulate nature, even the untrained and evil. Machines gave ordinary humans powers that only gods and wizards should have. Though it hurt to admit it, the boy knew that what the sage had said was true, and was very reluctantly handed over his tracing of the painter's sketch. As he did so, however, a young wizard, who had been watching them, interjects. Esteemed sage, wasn't magic ordinarily intended to make our lives easier? If machines achieve the same efforts, why shouldn't we use them? Because machines can be used by the wrong people. For the wrong reasons, replied the sage impatiently. But the young wizard was undeterred. I have been to the other world, and I know how things work there. There have been people called scientists. They are the ones who make machines. They work miracles. They are capable of mixing iron with other rare metals to create things called alloys, which are strong enough to plow even the rockiest of soil. You cannot deny the farmers' lives are much easier as a result. Surely you do not believe that all scientists seek to improve people's lives, the sage snapped back. Do you not think, perhaps, that some of them wish to use their machines to control people, to bend them to their will? The young wizard was speechless for a moment, but he soon found his tongue again. Couldn't the same be said for magic? Aren't there some people who seek the use of magic to increase their own influence? The boy tried listening to the conversation between the sage and the young wizard, but they used a lot of difficult words that he had trouble following. He wanted to do, after all, was fly. A dream come true. In the years that followed, more and more people made visits to the other world. They would become increasingly surprised and impressed the machines they saw there, and would rush back to their own world to tell people all about them. The sages realized that something must be done because technology from the other world was threatening to ruin the balance of their own. They decided to seal the tunnel to the other world to ensure that the place of magic within society was never threatened again. Now visiting the other world was not completely forbidden. Why, powerful wizards could still cast a spell known as Gateway and travel to the other world at any time they pleased. When the boy who was a young man by now, heard about the sages had done, he was terribly disappointed. Dash it all, he thought. Now I'll never be able to visit the other world again. And yet he still dreamed of flying. If anything, he dreamed of it more than ever. Having thought about it every day for a long time, he eventually had an idea. What if I build a flying machine that was powered by magic? Surely the sages couldn't object to that. I shall make it magical, but I shall jolly well build it and fly it as I like. Many months of his hard work passed later. The young man's magical flying machine was complete. Its magical power had been provided. Yes, you guessed it. The young wizards who had the argument with the sage all those years ago. Once the final touches had been applied, it was time for the test flight. The young man straddled his machine and took off into the sky. The machine's wings flapped gently as it glided through the air, and its magically enchanted engine allowed him to stay in the sky for several hours. Midway through the test flight, he looked down. The sheep in the fields were as small and dormant as he could see, the waves of the sea in the distance glinting in the morning sun. I don't think anyone alive has ever felt happier, thought the young man with glee. Indeed, he was too captivated by the scenery to spare a thought for the effect his new magical machine would have on the world. He known what impact it would have. He couldn't be sure he would not have been quite so elated. The 11th tale, The Tree and the Stone, the greatest tree in the deep dark woods. The deep dark wood is a dense green forest located in the northern part of the continent, now known as the Summerlands. Though there are some beautiful crystal clear waterfalls on the other sides of minor interest, travelers mainly flock to the deep dark wood on account of a great tree known as Old Father Oak. Princes and paupers alike have long visited this tree in the hope of gleaning some understanding from him, for old Father Oak's great wisdom and benevolence have led men to consider him the world's elder, though no such title officially exists. The young tree's journey. There was nothing unusual about the tree that became old Father Oak when his first green shoots emerged from the ground. Many centuries ago, the tree grew, as all trees grow, year on year, his branches reaching upward in search of sunlight, his roots thrusting downward in search of water. One day, when he was still but a young sapling, he was dug up by a group of humans. A large stone was placed beneath him, just below his roots, and he was then replanted on top of a stone. The hole around him refilled with soil, and the humans recited an incantation and drew a rune, and when his ceremony was over, retreated from the forest. Now the presence of the stone made life difficult for the young tree. No matter how hard he tried to stretch his roots, the stone meant that they simply could not reach any further into the ground. After several days of trying, the tree was about to give up when all of a sudden the stone started speaking to him. "Tell me, what can you see from up there? Pray tell me what you can see, for I am no ordinary rock. One day I shall become a magical stone, a great and very important one." The tree was very surprised to hear Stone talking to him, so casually and not a little vexed. "And why should I tell you anything? You do nothing but get in my way of my roots." The tree uttered these words much to his own surprise, for he had never been able to speak before. And so the stone began explaining his situation to the tree. It appeared that in order for the stone to become a magical stone, he had been placed beneath the roots of a tree and enchanted in a special ceremony. And so the tree grew older and wiser. He would impart some of his wisdom onto the stone and allow the stone's own magical powers to develop. The tree's ability to talk was simply one of the things he had learned as he had grown, and the stone had learned from this tree. Armed with newfound talents, the tree began talking to the birds and fairies and the other forest creatures, and upon hearing their tales of the outside world, developed an insatiable desire to travel, to leave the spot which he was rooted, and so began pulling his roots until cracks appeared in the ground. He kept pulling day after day, unable to stop or be stopped until, eventually, the inevitable happened, and the great creaking sound the tree wrenched himself and his short roots out of the ground altogether. It was a moment that the tree discovered that he knew how to walk, and resolved to leave the deep dark wood immediately, and make for pastures new. The stone felt very sad to see his only friend in the world preparing to leave, and said, "Promise me that you will come back and see me sometime, won't you?" The young tree should like nothing more than to hear all your travels. "Of course, I shall come back and see you, I promise." And so the tree set off on his journey. He felt sorry for the stone, who would now never become the magic stone he wanted to be, but he knew that he had to follow his own dreams. The young tree's journey allowed him to acquire great wisdom. Every time he encountered perils or monsters, he would simply stand stock still and pretend to be an ordinary tree. Should a predator come sniffing, the young tree would wait until he was very close before rustling his branches violently, giving the creature a terrible fright, and sending it scuttling away in fear. The promise to a stone. The tree's journey continued through storms and blizzards until into dank black caves and across deep blue oceans. On the day, he would sometimes meet other trees on their journeys of their own. Most of the trees he encountered had also been chosen locations for burying magical stones, and they too had left their stones behind and set out on their own adventures. He also encountered trees that were broken or withered, having become lost into the deserts, or trapped in great snowfalls. One day, several months into his journey, the young tree realized that it was becoming more and more difficult for him to move. No matter how much fresh water he drank, or how pleasant the sun fell upon his leaves, he was becoming slower and slower. "This must be what happened to all those dead trees I saw," the tree thought, "and that's what's going to happen to me." Suddenly the tree remembered the promise he made to the stone back in the deep dark woods. His promise to return to the forest and tell the stone all about his travels. The young tree had not visited the stone once since that day. Indeed, He'd completely forgotten about him. I should go back, he thought. I should return and speak to the stone while I still have strength enough to move. And so the tree set off home, back to the deep dark woods. The tree's short roots were dragging behind him all the way, trying to get him to stop, but the tree ignored them and eventually made his way back to the forest, where he first sprouted from the ground. The sight of his old stone companion, however, gave him a real shock. Having failed to become a magical stone, he had been mistaken for an ordinary rock, and most of him had been chipped off and carried away to make tools and other objects. Only a tiny piece of him remained. Undeterred, the young tree proceeded to recount all the travel stories, and Little Stone listened to every one in silent wonder. What happened next? When the tree had finished telling the stone the last of his tales, he thought to himself, "Now that I have fulfilled my promise to the stone, I shall not mind if I wither and die where I stand." Curiously, however, the tree noticed that he was feeling far healthier than he had for a long while. It turned out that much of the stone's ability to talk had come from the tree, and the tree's ability to walk had come from being near the stone. And as he spent more and more time away from the stone, the tree had started to lose his power. He now understood that the unfortunate dead trees he had seen on his travels had lost the power of movement on account of neglecting to visit their stone companions. The tiny stone in the tree, who was no longer very young, formed a firm alliance and became inseparable friends. Indeed, the tree placed the stone into the hollow in his trunk, allowing him to share all his knowledge and wisdom. The two would occasionally go on journeys together, acquiring even greater experience and wisdom, for it turns out that while the stone had not become magical during the tree's long absence, he became incredibly knowledgeable. As the years went by, the tree and the stone garnered great repute for their surpassing wisdom, becoming known as Old Father Oak and the Telling Stone, respectively. Indeed, to this day, travelers still venture into the deep dark woods, seeking advice from the most unlikely pairing of tree and stone. And so ends this branch of the story of the Old Father Oak and the Telling Stone. The 12th and final tale of the 12 Tales of Wonder, the Young Woman's Journal. An old traveler stood on a street corner, telling a crowd of people all about his adventures. The crowd enjoyed listening to his tales, and one of them asked him, "What is the most incredible thing you have ever seen?" The old traveler thought for a while and answered, "Let me tell you about a notebook I found. I was traveling through some truly inhospitable terrain, a jungle so thick that no light passed through its canopy, located in the foothills of a steep mountain range. I was certain that I was the first human to set foot in this place, until I came upon a notebook. Imagine my surprise when I looked inside and saw that it was a young girl's journal. I became obsessed with it. I couldn't stop thinking about this little girl, and what had happened to her. Listening to these entries, did you ever hear of a tale so wondrous as hers? I wonder where you've gone. I've been looking for you all this time, but I can't find you anywhere. Passing through a village today, I heard some people talking about you. They described you a little differently from what I remember, but it was definitely you. They said you were heading north, so that is where I shall go to. I don't believe they say you've thrown yourself into some kind of swamp, something called the Miasma Marshes. Why would you do such a thing? What am I going to do now? I finally found someone who could tell me about the Miasma Marshes. It doesn't sound good. It seems those who gaze at the marshes are lured towards them by the evil spirits who reside there. They prey on those who've been overcome by despair and compel them to throw themselves in. Is that what happened to you? I finally understand the mystery of the Miasma Marshes. Well, I know what I have to do. Last night, a traveling wizard told me people in this world share a soul with a person in another world. These people are called soulmates. According to him, soulmates' lives are intertwined and affect each other. By throwing themselves into the Miasma Marshes, however, people can cut that bond that links them to their soulmates, allowing their hearts to be consumed by evil. Those who have done so are beyond redemption. Even releasing the evil from their hearts and reconnecting them to their soulmates does not bring back the person they once were. He told me something else as well. Something important I need some time to think about what to do next. It is decided. I must become a wizard. It is the only way I can save you. It's been several years since I last wrote in this journal. I am a great sage now, capable of breaching time itself. I have decided to go back and rescue the other you. I'm going to take good care of him, right from the very start. I know I'll never be able to return to this time, but I will not regret this. In the other world, I'll find the floating soul, to which you were once connected. I will absorb it. The soul will then be reborn as my own child. I'm setting out on a journey, a long journey, to acquire the life that I need in order to save you. That is the least I can do for you, after what you did for me. I believe that one day your soul will return, and that we'll meet again. You saved me. You sacrificed everything for me. You gave your life so I could live mine. I must see you again. After the old traveler had finished reading the journal, the crowd had assembled before him, stood silent for a long while. Before any of them could think of what to say, the old traveler turned around and shuffled off to continue his wanderings. But just as he was about to leave the town, he looked back at his dumbstruck audience and addressed them once again. The notebook wasn't the only thing I found that day. There was a wand lying next to it. I think it must have been hers. And with that, our story is completely over. As you saw with the final story, it is the story of the Great Sage Alicia and Shadar, also known as Lucian, which is actually pretty cool. And you end up getting this story inside Oliver's home, inside Oliver's mother's room, which is actually pretty cool. But, as I said, today's episode is the final one. And with this reading, we are completely over and done with our adventure. So, with that, thank you all for watching today's episode. Thank you for watching this entire series. And Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch Revisited is officially over. So, one last time, thank you so much for joining me for this. And it's been a blast. So, with that, I'll be seeing you all in our next series. And I hope you'll join me for the very next one. So, with that, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And see you all in the next one. Peace out. Hey boys and girls, thank you all for watching today's episode. If you liked what you saw today, please leave a like and maybe even subscribe. And hit the bell notification down below. If you guys have any kind of suggestions for games, please put that in the comments down below as well. Thank you all for watching today's episode, and keep being spooky. Peace out, guys.